Okay, so opening the episode with a bunch of TVA agents intruding on a Renaissance fair is probably just meant to be a little joke at the expense of time travel as a whole, but choosing to set this fair specifically in Oshkosh, Wisconsin most certainly is not. Instead, it is actually a shout-out to Marvel writer Mark Gruenwald, who is famous for creating a handful of Captain America characters that you should all be familiar with by now. Because those characters are none other than the US Agent, Battlestar, and the Flag Smasher, most recently featured in the previous MCU Disney Plus series, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. In fact, this reference goes further, as Agent Mobius's appearance in the comic books, and by extension Owen Wilson's appearance in the series, was based specifically on Gruenwald to begin with. Oh, and the importance of Oshkosh in terms of Marvel doesn't quite stop there. In-universe, Oshkosh also happens to be the childhood home of one Wendell Vaughn, the first man to go by the superhero moniker of Quasar. Think we should be on the lookout for a Quasar movie trailer? Among the inspirations for the detective aspects of the show, David Fincher's dark 90s crime thriller Seven has been cited a few times thus far. And during a press conference close to the series premiere, series director Kate Herron told viewers to be on the lookout for a more specific reference in episode 2. Well, sure enough, we found it. When Loki is poring over files at the TVA and tries to get the apathetic librarian to help, the music she's listening to is Johann Sebastian Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 3 in D major. The exact same bit of classical music that's heard when Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman's characters in Seven are doing their own bit of research on the gruesome, 7 deadly sins-obsessed serial killer that they're chasing. Apparently, there's just something about Bach's music that helps investigators get into the minds of deranged killers. Huh, I wonder how Bach would feel about that. Let's borrow a TVA time portal and go ask him. Putting some of those deduction skills to use that he has no doubt learned from centuries of scamming and manipulating people, Loki eventually figures out that the variant he and Agent Mobius are hunting seems to be hanging out shortly before catastrophic events at various times in history. Thus, he ends up dragging Mobius to Pompeii shortly before the eruption at Mount Vesuvius, which famously destroyed the city. However, the real Easter egg here happens when Loki, in order to demonstrate that divergent actions in the past have no consequence close to major disasters, without ruining Mobius's lunch this time, starts loudly foretelling the future to everyone that will listen, all in Latin. But this isn't necessarily Loki flexing some unknown linguistics degree, though. If we go by the comics, it's most likely Loki demonstrating an innate Asgardian ability known as the Allspeak, which ensures that anything an Asgardian says is understood by the listener in their native tongue. Be that a dead language, or even an alien one. It hasn't come up much in the movies, and it certainly has not been name-dropped, but it seems slightly more likely than Loki taking the time out of his schedule to go study Latin between screwing around with the Asgardians and trying to take over the Earth. Cross-referencing Loki's theory about the variant hiding near major historical disasters and the pack of gum Mobius found last episode, the two quickly deduce that one of variant Loki's hiding places must be at a mall called Roxcart in the year 2050, when that gum was sold. Now, Marvel fans are likely to stop and take a second look once they see the name Rox, since it refers to the Roxxon Energy Corporation, which has been lurking in the background of Marvel Comics ever since its introduction back in 1974. It has even made its presence known in the live-action Marvel productions before. More specifically, they've been referenced in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, Iron Fist, Runaways, as well as all 3 Iron Man films, and the corporation played a major antagonistic role in the first season of Cloak and Dagger. Being a general send-up to unscrupulous mega-corporations in real life, Roxxon tends to be depicted as a company that puts its own profit margin above anything else, engaging in all sorts of morally questionable activities that constantly brings them into conflict with just about every corner of the Marvel superhero community. Many costumed criminals have worked for them too, such as the Killer Shrike, Manticore, and Tarantula, to name a few, along with the original comic book versions of MCU villains Ghost and Flag Smasher. As for what connection Roxxon has with Loki specifically, though, allow me to introduce their most recent CEO, Dario Agger, possibly better known as the supervillain called Minotaur, one of the more recent additions to Thor's Rogues Gallery in the comics. Because when our beloved Thunder God runs out of Norse gods and monsters to fight, we bring in someone based on Greek mythology. Sure, why not? What, you thought the TVA was kidding when they said variants can be very different from their sacred timeline counterparts? Well, they weren't, no matter how funny glimpses at stuff like Tour de France Loki, or what appears to be some kind of Loki Hulk might be. And the God of Mischief most certainly learns that once he finally corners his alternative self and learns that this other Loki is a woman. A lady Loki, if you will. Now, this isn't just the show having fun with variants, though, as the comics version of Loki really did get reborn as a woman sometime after Ragnarok. No, not the MCU Ragnarok, the comics Ragnarok. Come on, try to keep up. Of course, Loki is a shapeshifter, and the mythological Loki was no stranger to switching sex when he felt like it, but this is still a bit of a surprise, if a welcome and interesting one. Or, at least, all of this is what I would say if we could be sure that this is Lady Loki at all, but there are signs that point elsewhere. First of all, she's blonde, while Lady Loki had black hair in the comics, just like male Loki usually does. Granted, this might mean nothing at all, what with the whole shapeshifter thing, but the blonde hair and possession powers may be a sign that she's not actually Lady Loki, but the Marvel supervillainess known as Enchantress. Or, more specifically, she's probably the second Enchantress, Sylvie Lushton, who was given her powers by Loki in the comics. Just take a look at those case files Loki pores over, and notice that they're reporting on a variant named Sylvie Laufeyson. And of course, reading the Castilian credits presents an even more damning bit of evidence, as her Spanish voice actress, Elisa Buter, is credited as playing not Lady Loki, not the variant, but Sylvie. Man, you really do have to pay attention to the paperwork.